Hi, and welcome to another Scientology Outside of the Church podcast. This is season 11, episode 23, on a Sunday, August 17th, 2025. I don't normally do that, but I thought I'd place this in time for time, place, form, and event for our listeners. Third podcast of the week. I'm here with Arthur Mudakis and Quentin Stroud, and the title of this is unclear to us as yet, but it most likely will be, Who Are You Really? And this was something that was on my mind for some time in the last week or so. And we've talked about this a lot in several of the other last podcasts, probably the last 5 or 6 podcasts. This is brought to you by the Advanced Org of the Great Plains, ao-gp.org, and the College of Independent Scientology.com, our online social media platform for independent Scientology, and our online course room. So to jump right into the deep end of the pool, who are you really? And that question is prompted by the ethics conditions in the condition of treason, which is find out who you really are. And can you know who you really are and know your own worth? Because if you knew who you really were, you'd know your own worth. That's directly what it comes down to. I mean, if you think about it, if you knew who you really were, you would be, okay, I am this, 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 and this. And then this comes down to, are you happy? If you were happy, you'd know your own worth. If you're happy, your ethics would be in across the 8 dynamics and you'd be doing well in life. And this is something that auditing and training both help with, but before you get started, you have to have ethics in order for tech to go in order for administration to go in. And this also correlates with the ARC triangle: affinity, reality, communication, create understanding, and the KRC triangle, which is knowledge, responsibility, and control equal power. You can't have KRC without ARC. So if you know who you really are and you know your own worth, then you have KRC for your 8 dynamics. That's it in a nutshell. So we're gonna unpack this a little bit and look at the angles of knowing your own worth and what that means. And Quentin, the way and the things that he deals with in his practice and the people that he deals with, um, he sees the more colorful side of things, to me at least, than I do. So what is the phenomenon of a person knowing their own worth based off of what you see every day in some of these 3-hour sessions and stuff you do?
Yeah, right, you said 3 right. I think that when we look at knowing your own worth, and you said it's connected with knowing who you are, I look at it very simplistically, right? I look at it as in if if one understood, fully cognited upon and originated for themselves who you really are. Like this is not your degree. This is not your parents and who you are because I'm my father's child and I'm my mother's daughter and da da da. Like if you really look at it, like who are you, and you get to determine that for yourself. You assume a beingness, right? By doing that, it automatically puts you in a position of power, right? Because now you get to make a stand, and you get to hold a position in space of this is who I am, and from that I get to move forward,
Mhm,
whatever that looks like for you.
mhm.
What happens is that we have so many vias telling us who we're supposed to be or what we should be or what that it must look like or should look like. I was just listening to a gentleman about finances, and he was talking about and you have to save for your kids' college. You got to save for your kids' college because they got to go to school, and you need to save for that because if you don't save for that, and he just went on for about 15 minutes about saving for kids' college, and I was like, well, how do you know if they want to go to school? You know what I mean? Like, what's the thing there? But that was something that he was working with, that they have to go to college and you need to save for their college so that they can make it,
Mhm.
that you won't have to pay for it later, which I get the practicality in that. But that is assuming that they want to go to college, and how they're going to turn out. So I just think that finding out who you really are, which is the condition of enemy, and
Oh,
and
a
getting
treason.
treason is
Do I have them reversed? No,
treason is that you are.
is that you are. There we
And
go.
yeah, and enemy is who you are. And so by finding that out, what ends up happening is you get to determine, like, I know who I am and I know what side I stand on. I know where I stand.
Mhm.
And nobody's gonna ever make me question that ever again. And with that truth that you establish for yourself, you can do anything. You can go anywhere in the world. You can have any experience we do have. And so I think that that's the viewpoint I come from it. Like, who are you really?
Right. I misspoke earlier in the podcast and I reversed them. Enemy is find out who you are.
Who?
Treason is find out
Mhm.
that you are. So you have to find out who you are, which is enemy. So that
Yeah.
to make sure that I clarify that who you really are is you're being your own enemy in and
That's so good.
you're being your own enemy on the first dynamic.
Ain't that
And
crazy?
yeah, I apologize on switching those two, but that's what it is it is you're your own enemy. And and an interesting point to make on this is when a person does a personality test with us, the Oxford Capacity Analysis Test, the original version, the church has a different version they use due to copyright issues. So that gives you a wrong answer within the church. We have the original that we used. LRH says that a lot of times what will happen is you'll get a personality test where the A, B, and C columns are high. They're above 25, which is you're good, you could do better, but you're good. And what happens is that people will take the personality test and like you were saying in the situation with the father saying you need to go to college and all of that. That's, that's a whole other topic, but enforcing something on somebody brings us back to the last podcast on fixed ideas, for one thing. And so the father's saying, this is what you have to do. This is what you have to do, kids. You need to go to college. And so that's his fixed idea that he's enforcing on his children. And then that enforces other determinism to the children and places a fixed idea on them that gets passed down from generation to generation and could be said, generally speaking, that that is a contagion of aberration based off of the father's valence of which he's operating off of that I've got to be secure. I've got to go to college. Mom and dad said I need to do this. And what happens is in the personality test, you'll see that the if those sides are high with their first personality test without any auditing, that set of columns, those first three columns, is incorrectly high because they're so in somebody else's valence that that's successful
Mhm.
to them. But you'll find that they're terribly unhappy. And that's where that's the litmus test where you go, okay, I see what's going on. As they get auditing, those three columns will drop down into the negative category below negative 25 because they'll start to realize they're not who they need to be.
Mhm.
They don't know who they are, but they cognite on the fact that I'm being somebody else and that's why I'm unhappy. And then they realize later on, just as an example, and this is all hypothetical, they realize, yeah, my mom and dad pushed me to go into college and they wanted me to be an attorney and I'm miserable being an attorney. And there you have it.
That's right. There you go.
Well, even a few weeks ago, you got me through um took me
And
through the Scientology ethics,
yeah.
and I agreed to all of them first run except for one.
Hmm.
And then when I really thought about it, I'm like, oh, hang on. Okay, yes, in my heart, I I stand with that, but my actions have not been that at
Hmm.
all. Like
Mm-hmm.
the first run through, I actually found myself lying or not realizing or not recognizing. And then the second run, I was just like, oh, hang on. Yes, I do believe in that. However, I have not been that. And I found that really interesting because what I thought was actually was not.
Right. So that's an important part, which is, and you know, you got lucky where if one can be honest with themselves, and you know, that's really the issue. And part of what I said in the statement to both of you in our chat group is by using ethics conditions is like confessing to yourself as opposed to confessing to a minister. If you were in the Catholic Church or you went to an auditor, and I think it's an interesting point to get across that to the degree that somebody, and we said this in I don't know how many podcasts, and I've got an article on it on the website and all of this stuff, that being honest with yourself is probably the hardest thing to confront. And if you're not there to be honest with yourself, you're going to find yourself going down the ethics conditions, like we talked about in a past podcast. Of if you don't apply the right condition and you're applying affluence, well, you're going to end up two conditions lower, or you're applying non-existence and you're going to end up at best danger or liability. So you keep running through these conditions in life, and you never really get out of lower conditions on the first dynamic because you never really looked at who you really were. And that's difficult to do sometimes for people because, well, again, a valence is a solution to a problem. A valence is a package of attitudes, behaviors, mannerisms, everything, ethics and all of this stuff, because it's and I hate to use this expression, but it's learned behavior. And you think, okay, this is how I have to be. But if you really do answer the question, find out who you really are, you'll look at it and you'll go, I've been an enemy to myself.
Mm.
So you have to get out of that in order to realize your own self-worth, not mommy, daddy's, your bosses or whatever, because again, like we've talked about in other podcasts, it's part of a goals, problems, mass situation where if you can't beat them, join them. If you're a potential trouble source, meaning that you're under suppression, and if you're under suppression and you commit an overt against that suppressor or somebody who appears to be a suppressor in present time, when it's really somebody down earlier in your life or even in a past life, and you commit an overt against them, now you're at effect of them. And auditing won't work till we get that sorted out. And that's all
Right.
part of that valence package, whether it's mommy or daddy, brother or sister, aunt, uncle, grandma or grandpa, your employer, whoever, or
Boyfriend, girlfriend. Mm.
boyfriend, girlfriend, or it's somebody that you've committed an overt against that's suppressing you, invalidating you, evaluating for you, making you miserable. And you're not just, and I have to say this, and you're just not, and this is a bit of a side rail. If you're blaming other people for something else, chances are you're out of valence. Think about
Yeah,
that for a second.
I think that's a brilliant statement because, and I said it earlier, I kind of get down to the simplicity of it. Knowing who you are is you coming to a decision about who you are and knowing that to be you, that to be true. And I think one of the simplest viewpoints is that number one, that you are a spiritual being, right? That you are an immortal spiritual being. And kind of like just that viewpoint can, when you really get it for yourself. Now, I'm not saying because Q said it, right? But when you really get it for yourself, that can blow a lot of case and a lot of charge. Just like I'm freaking immortal. Like I'm freaking like I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. And it like a lot of stuff just kind of a lot of weight, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stuff can lift off of you when you fully get who you really are.
Mhm.
Really now.
Yeah, and then
And
that's the foundation of it, what you're talking about right here.
Sure, sure. Just getting who you really are from a foundational viewpoint, like that you are this thing that is so much bigger and so much greater than you might have ever imagined. And then by removing all the valences and all the other stuff that you just talked about, mommy, daddy, sister, brother, cousin, and them, by removing all that stuff, it actually makes you happier. I'll tell you real quick story that my personal experience. I was in a car accident, and in the car accident, my cousin comes running down the street because it was near the house. She comes running down the street and she saw the accident. She comes running down the street and she starts yelling something, and I'm in earshot of this, of her yelling. And later on in life, I was like 11 or 12 years old. Later on in life, I'm grown, I'm a grown man driving a car or whatever, and I started becoming my cousin. And everything she said, I started doing it. Like it was almost like a hypnotic kind of suggestion kind of thing. Everything she said, I started doing it. And over and over and over again, I would have car accidents. This literally happened. I would have car accidents over and over. I probably totaled like 4 or 5 vehicles before I was like 19. And over and over and over again, this was happening. It wasn't until years later that I'm in Dianetics auditing and I pull out this incident where I was taking on this valence and I was being somebody else. It was crazy. And I was being the driver and my cousin, and I totally lifted this stuff, and I now have been able to live my life totally free of accidents. It's brilliant. But it was all because I was being somebody that I wasn't, and it was causing me to be my own enemy. Hello, we just said this, causing me to be my own enemy when it comes to, in this case for me, driving.
Right.
Go figure.
You've heard the expression, to our listeners, you've heard the expression that they're their own worst enemy.
Yep. And
And
sabotage.
that's really what that is. And that comes down to they don't know their own worth because they're being somebody else as a solution to a problem. And that problem is ultimately, how do I survive? So you have to come out of that condition of enemy and work your way up. And then treason is find out that you really are. And I have to use the word that, but recently I had to clear the word that up with somebody. And Arthur ran into this as well when we were doing his life repair in the small common words. If basic building block words such as that and as and of and all of this are misunderstood, you're not going to get that far. So I would have to ask people, do you know what who and really and what are as definitions consist of, without using the word are? So
Right.
that's the thing is if you have, and we said this time and time and time and time again, an overt is based off of a misunderstood concept, word, or symbol. And if a person doesn't understand the verb to be, get it? The verb to be, how I am, how in the world are they ever going to find out who they really are? Because are is a conjugation of be. You could say to them, who are you being? Think about that when you say it that way. But if you don't understand the verb to be, which is one of the words that are cleared up in the Key to Life course, the fundamental building blocks of the English language, to exist, a state of existence, who are you being? That's a interesting question to ask somebody. It seems like it's nothing, but it's everything. So
yeah,
if who you're being is somebody else. You don't know your self-worth. Therefore, you're going to accept other people's evaluations and invalidations on who you are being, which brings everything into question, because without that stable footing, you're never, ever going to get out of the condition of enemy to yourself.
Mm. And it's funny because like the self-honesty is the biggest part of it. Like confronting your own honesty is probably one of the most difficult things to do, because it might mean you're wrong. And it's easier to blame, as you said earlier, and I agree with you totally, Quentin, as well. The freedom, once you start confronting those parts of yourself and really take them seriously, a whole world opens up and your ability just increases almost instantly.
Mhm.
Well, it's really quite incredible. Then those things you thought were impossible all of a sudden start becoming possible. And then once that starts creeping in and leaking into your mind, then your thinking changes completely around future goals, future um a future you. Like it's
Right,
really quite incredible.
right. And and that therein it lies the rub. I'll give you an example, and this is a convoluted example, but it's an extremely common example, especially in families that have, brothers and sisters, and you're a kid, and one of the siblings gets more attention than you do, and so you realize, as LRH says, you're going to take on the valence of the person who gets the most attention. This is on the PTSSP course lectures, which is from the St. Hill Special Briefing course in 61 to 66. You're going to take on the valence of the person who gets the most attention, because the person who gets the most attention is the most, in an aberrative standpoint, is the person who has the most survival potential, because attention is the second greatest particle in flow that a being what considers to be important, the first most being admiration. So they get admiration and attention all wrapped up, and I'm going to be my brother, and I'm going to act like he does. And then you go out and you start drinking or you do drugs, and you see that being, because brother is out ethics, you start doing the same thing he does. Now you're not being yourself, because the best way to survive is to get attention, or is to be a certain way. And that might include second dynamic flagrant out ethics. It might include first dynamic flagrant out ethics, because it is very noteworthy to, and I've seen this so many times in different sessions with different pre-clears, that when a person is in their teens and they do hard drugs, street drugs, or hard medical drugs, or alcohol, they tend to stunt their growth as a being, and they stick there on the track, and they never mature past that point. And when I say never, I mean it's really difficult to get through. It's like their shoes are cemented in that period in time. Now, in a lot of cases, you can undo that with new era Dianetics. And there's lots of different rundowns that we have for that sort of a thing. The LX lists, which handle a person's OCA graph to get them out of that type of a thing. But in some cases, they've screwed up the circuitry in their brain with hard drugs, probably more than anything. But alcohol, or a lot of engramic events that occur at that time, because they're committing these overts as motivators, because there's two types of an engram per LRH. There's the motivator engram, and there's the overt engram. And you have to get all sides of that. That's why we do flows, others to you, you to others to others, you to yourself. So in this hypothetical situation, it's a situation where you can't see the trees for the forest, and you can't be honest with yourself, because you're so stuck at that period in time as a solution to the problem of attention, that you really think consistently who you really are is who you were when you were 13, 14, whatever it is, depending on the country. But I mean, I'll give you one example. At the age of 10, I've seen people being introduced to hard drugs. And that's probably lower than that now. This was a couple decades ago, and this person is an adult now. 10. And now they're in their 20s, stuck at that point on the track. And that was a mind blower to me. So it's really difficult to come round on this. Back to the beginning of the point is if a person is so stuck at that point, how can they find out who they really are? They have a really hard time getting out of that and being honest with themselves in order to facilitate spiritual growth. So my job as a CS is to spot where that is in interviews and all of that, and find out these terminals, and terminals being people in their life, and find those terminals and audit those terminals from a viewpoint of a valence aspect in order to allow them, because you've got two different ways. The first one is the most important ethics-wise. You do as much as you can with the person on ethics conditions to get them out of the lower condition, if you're lucky, and they can be honest with themselves and you can get them through it so that auditing works. Because chances are, at the time that their growth was stunted, for example, in this hypothetical situation, but real, can you get them out of that enough in order for the auditing to get in and work? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, because it comes down to, can you be honest enough to say, okay, and if you have enough attention units, which is from a Dianetic standpoint, you have 100 attention units and 70 of those are wrapped up in engrams and everything like that. You've got 30 attention units. It's like Monopoly. You've only got so much money to buy real estate with mentally. And so sometimes we have to use a very gradient approach to try and undo those Dianetic locks, like with self-analysis lists, and loosen up those locks, or do book one on them to allow and facilitate to get back as much money back into the mental monopoly game so that you have more to invest into yourself. So it depends on the being, it depends on the drug use. But again, part of the thing to loosen that up is the purification rundown, the Scientology drug rundown, objectives, all of these things to get them to a point. And you may get one answer on the conditions below the purif, and you may get an entirely different set of answers if you do the conditions with them again after objectives, purif, and Scientology drug rundown and straight wire, because now they have the facility, they have a few more attention units to look at that situation and go, oh, geez, I was doing this. Now the auditing bites more. And as you progress, the auditing bites more. And in less severe situations, it's the same thing for everyone in this situation. If they have a false A, B, and C column on their personality test, you'll see it break down to the lower levels because they've realized they're being somebody else. And they're starting to realize their self-worth. Sorry for the long explanation, but I hope I've made it clear and I haven't made it too technical. But
I was
that's
actually going to ask you,
Go ahead.
what the process would be. Yeah. So I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
good.
What's the process of handling that? Because and when you say we shift into, or we'll take on another person's valence that gets the most attention, I think we also see that, with the advent of social media. Now, back in the 50s when LH was discovered and all that stuff, they didn't have they didn't have social media. They didn't have all these apps and whatnot. But now with social media, who's getting the most attention? What are these influencers on? What are they doing? Who do I need to be now in order to survive better? In order to, and so we take on all these valences. We see it a lot with the manosphere. And what does it mean to be a man? Right. And so we take on these valences in order to be a man. And how does a man present? How does a man show up? How does a man act, or whatever? All of these things that are happening, um, that I don't even know if LRH even perceived that this is the way of the future, but it's like this is now happening worldwide, and it's happening where you get who's winning biggest in the world now, not just in your own little, third dynamic, right?
Mhm.
Now our social media influencers are part of our third dynamic. Now the Facebook groups or the Instagram followers that I follow, they're part of my third dynamic. Now, these are my friends. That's what Facebook says. They're Facebook friends. These people are not your friends, right? But our third dynamic has gotten so that it seems as if these people are my third dynamic now. And now who's getting the most attention? Well, let me take on that valence. Let me be like, and you can fill in the blank, whoever you follow, whoever your thing is. But we start to take on this stuff. And so, it stands to reason then when you look at us as independent Scientologists and you're like, these people are different, you know, we talk different, we walk different, we think different, we're peculiar people, right? Like it's different because we ain't trying to take on nobody else's valence. Like I'm not trying to be them. Just not.
Yeah. Yeah, that and I think that it's telling that if a person is looking around for um and it's it's it kind of goes without saying that if you're looking for somebody to influence you, you don't know your own self-worth.
That part.
Well, it's kind of a catch-22 because once somebody realizes that they want to find themselves, then they'll start looking, right? And
True.
then that's when they'll start getting influenced as well. And you might try 20, 30, 50, 100 different valences before you realize you have your own.
Yeah, and
Maybe.
maybe, and you're looking for answers, and if you look at and Quentin, Arthur, I don't know how much time you spend on social media, but I know, and having lived with Quentin and him looking for the latest trends and all of that stuff, and really staying on top of it from an external, outside of the box viewpoint, which is Quentin's really good at that, and having been around him for a few months and seeing how he's looking at these things and how people are looking at this stuff, he'll send stuff into the group. Uh, and he just sent us something the other day. What was that on about the Christian viewpoint between a couple, and what was sex and what
Oh,
wasn't?
that's
What
right.
wasn't
Oh
sex?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
and you said this is the prevalent viewpoint,
This
that
is
it's
how
okay
Christians
to do
live, yeah.
this, and this because that isn't sex. And then you go, what? How can
Yep.
somebody
Yep.
have that out ethics viewpoint of, well, I didn't use the front door, I used the back door, and that makes it okay with another girl? I mean, come on. I mean, come on.
Right.
And you get into these justifications and stuff like that. Another example is if you look at what's trending, the narcissism thing
Yep.
is, I mean, if you look at one narcissist
Oh, it's
TikTok
millions.
video, or you look at Facebook Reels from Instagram and TikTok, it's in the millions, because
Yeah.
it's true that narcissists exist, but it's another term for suppressive, and it's only
Mhm.
2.5% of the society that's truly suppressive. It's
Yeah.
a 17.5 that are PTS, and you go, well, this explains it. Everybody's looking for a reason to point the finger at somebody else.
Yep. Because they're not because they cannot or they have not found out who they really are. And the truth of the matter is, when you know who you really are, a narcissist really has less power in your life anyway.
Right.
So if you're just PSA to anybody who felt like they've been dealing with a narcissist, know who you are. Okay, that's the answer to that. Know who you are, because when you know who you are, the narcissist loses power, or that person that's suppressive or whatever, that person loses power because you know your power, you know your worth, you know what you're about, and you know who can be against you at that point.
Right. Right. And that's it. It is, if you're looking for input from somewhere else,
Yeah,
chances are you don't know who you really are. And that's when you
yeah.
have to go, okay, I'm not being honest with myself, so on and so forth.
And this is why do these podcasts, and this is why we have these conversations, and we try to be as current and relevant as possible to what's going on in the everyday world of our listeners, because the truth of the matter is this is stuff that hits people every single day. I had a lady contact me earlier today, like it was like 4 o'clock in the morning her time, and she was going on and on about something going on in her relationship, and I just can't sleep. I just can't sleep. I don't know. And you could tell the anxiety that was on her, and the anxiousness that she was dealing with. And it was unfortunate because really it had nothing to do with her. Like it really had everything to do with like what was going on in her 2D's experience or whatever the person she was flowing towards. And I was like, well, why does that concern you so? Well, I don't know. Like, do you think it's gonna be this? Do you think it's gonna be that? Do you think that? And you could just see it going on and on and on.
Mhm.
And I was like, well, who are you, baby? Who are you being right now? What is
Mhm.
this? You
Right.
know? And when I kind of asked, I said, who are you in all this? Like, what does that have to do with you? When I kind of asked it that way, she kind of snapped out of it. And she was like, oh, well, yeah, I guess you're right. I guess I need to just, focus on me right now. No, that's okay. you
Yeah.
know, and it was good. And it was good that she was able to kind of come to that realization. But all in all, I just think people are hitting this kind of stuff at every moment, and we're inundated with it. And now it's time for us to get some auditing to clear a lot of this stuff up. And when you then look at the world through a clear lens, double entendre,
Mhm.
you look at the world through a clear lens, you get to a point where it's like, okay, I can be me no matter what. And that feels really good.
Mhm. Yeah. So it comes down to what you're being hit with. If you're looking for things and there's just so many things to choose, and you tried this, and you tried that, and tried this, none of these things work. Well, you're definitely having a hard time trying to figure out who you really are, and you're searching, and you have to and sitting down and saying, okay, this is who I really am, can be the hardest thing ever, because it's
Mm.
difficult to confront, and you may not be able to get through that. And we have, a lot of tools to solve that. But it all comes down to you being honest with yourself and saying, I need change, and I can confront that, and I can use independent Scientology to get through this stuff. And, if you can't, well, what's true for you is true for you. And we accept that. But if you're looking for change and you're in independent Scientology and you can't seem to get out of this, talk to us about it. Let us know.
Please.
I mean, that's the only thing you can do if you confront up to it. And, there's a lot of factors that go into this, but do a personality test, get the results defined for you and what's going on and everything. And we can give you a factual viewpoint on it. And, sometimes it's hard to hear. And there's a difference between an evaluation, and I tell people all the time when I'm doing their assessment or evaluation of the personality test, don't shoot the messenger. I'm merely
Right.
telling you about the answers you put into the personality test, and these are the results. And if you can go, "Ah, I can see how that could be. I don't know why, but I can see how that can be." Okay, then, we can help. But if you take it personal and, "Oh, I can't believe that you would say that, and I'm so offended." It happens rarely, but it
Mhm.
does happen. Sometimes I look at a graph and go, after having talked to them before they did their graph, and I see their graph and say, sort
Mm.
of, I don't know that they're going to be able to have this. It's rare,
Mhm.
again, but sometimes you can't tell them because they're so defensive about it. They know they need change, but anything you say can and will be used against you as a personality test evaluator. Chances are it won't work. And every time that has come up, it didn't work, is another interesting note from a Scientological standpoint, because sometimes they have to be so right. The door is cemented, painted over, re-bricked, mortared, everything, and you're dealing with the triple wall because they're going to sit there and stand behind that and just go.
Yeah.
and that's unfortunate.
And when you get a chance, for those of you listening, when you get a chance, go to the website, go to ao-gp.org and take a look at some of these success stories. Take a look at some of the wins and some of the success stories that you see here. That is such an interesting um, story that I think is being told as you kind of read through them, because you see more and more and more of people really coming to themselves, right? They come to themselves, they come to this awareness of self that is so powerful. And it sounds almost kind, if if you just haven't experienced it, it sounds almost kind of like, okay, that's nice.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, okay, that was nice. That's a nice. I'm so proud of them. I'm so happy for them, right? But nah, when you really get what this actually means for the course of their existence, when you get what this actually means for just again, I tell my story again about stop having car accidents. Like I could have been dead and gone, with the
Right.
amount of accidents I was getting myself into. And I mean, and I was totaling cars like while I'm in them. You understand what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like total them. Like just go to the junkyard. Can't even do nothing with them. And yet, I was able to survive these things. My point is that that is life changing when I was able to pick up that I was actually out valence
Hmm.
having car accidents,
Hmm.
as opposed to me being who I am and being able to be safe out here in these streets.
Hmm.
Like that made me happy. I don't know about you.
And it's
Yeah.
funny because to me, that's when you're in theta. Like that's when you're
Yes,
working with your own theta.
Right.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interpolated
Like,
theta.
yeah.
And it's I think go ahead.
I was gonna say, and per LRH to that point, like he actually says that the worth of a person is. I'm gonna get it right here. Um, he said that the worth of a person consists of. I'm sorry, the worth of any organism. Axiom 194. The worth of any organism consists of its value to the survival of its own theta along any dynamic.
Yeah.
And so the worth you talk about, you knowing your worth, the worth of any organism consists of its value to the survival of its own theta along any dynamic. When you look at your life, when you look at your experiences, when you look at your relationships, when you look at your third dynamic, your fifth dynamic, your house, your home, your life, whatever, look at the survival of your own theta along that dynamic. And if it's not where you want it to be, reach out to me. If it's not where you want it to be, let's talk. When you look at your car, when you look at your home, when you look at your six dynamic, when you look at your life, when you look at your plants around your house, whatever, I don't care what you look at any dynamic. And if it's not where you want to be, let's talk about how do we increase the survival of your own theta along your dynamics. And that is going to be the barometer for the worth of you as a being. How well are you surviving as you?
Right. And it's important to note that
Well said.
yeah, it's very important to note that it's not how other people view you
Yeah.
and your worth. Okay. If you're
Yeah.
doing that, you're violating your own code of honor, which is part of the Scientology code of honor. And LRH talks about you can judge a person by their mess. Okay. And
Mhm.
that includes plants and animals. And it occurred to me every time I've met someone, and I'm just saying this is an observation, it's not something LRH said. Every time I've met a person where their plants weren't doing well and weren't thriving, and they had plants, every time I met a person where their cats and their dogs were mean, you know what was going
Mm.
on? Because cats and dogs, in my opinion, they tend to I don't want to say mimic, they tend to reflect the treatment that they get. Plants,
Mhm.
animals, dogs. Other pets could be included too. Parrots, Jesus. Especially the macaws and the cockatoos. Jeez.
They'll tell you
Yeah,
how you like what they
they'll
heard.
tell you they're a mirror of that person, and you're like, whoa. Cats and dogs, a little less, plants, less so, but they reflect
Mm.
the and theta or theta of the being that is their primary caregiver. Isn't that interesting? That they're almost a
And you know, it's
reflection.
funny you mentioned that. It's funny you mentioned that because back home I have a lot of wild animals coming and going from my yard,
Mm-hmm.
and I actually use them as my own indicator of where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
Because when my theta's out, they don't come to me. When it's in, they do come to me. And what's really cool about that is sometimes I might think I'm out, but they still come to me, and it's just a refreshing reminder. Oh, okay, things are actually just
You're
fine.
okay.
And the funny thing about the
Mm-hmm.
plants
Yeah.
thing you just said, um, I was great at growing plants, and then all of a sudden it just stopped. And then plants that I had for years just died. And that was through a significant experience
Yep.
in my home.
I've experienced the same thing.
And I just find that really interesting how your surrounds really reflect where you're at, especially nature. Nature is just incredible at reflecting you.
That's
Right.
interesting.
Right.
That's very
Yeah.
interesting. That we have this brotherhood with the universe, per LRH, like that we come to attain this brotherhood with the universe, and that really is very powerful. I know that when because I growing up and as I got older, I was always a brown thumb or black thumb, they call it. Like every plant around me would die. Uh, but
Brown thumb.
I'll say since starting auditing with ALGP, I was in Iloilo in Philippines, and that's the first time, Jonathan, that I was able to grow have plants. And we had this whole like right there when I would do auditing, remote auditing with you on the cans, right next to my computer and stuff, right next to my desk, I would have a whole bunch of plants lined up on this table. And it was just like it was like a little forest that was over there. And I used to love being, having the plants. And I was concerned that when I travel, because I travel a lot, when I travel, oh, the plants are gonna die, the plants are gonna die. But we would come back and they wouldn't be dead. They would still be okay. And I'm like, yes, okay, the plants are still alive. Okay, they're good. Whew, I would be very happy about that. But um, we also see it in like Disney movies, right? You talked about nature and wild animals. How many times have you seen like Snow White and the princesses and stuff? And the birds will come and the
Yeah,
birds will
that's
land
right.
right on them and help
Showing
them.
their purity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the animals will help them make a dress or whatever. You know, it's like there's something to it when you know who you really are, and you have this a brotherhood with the universe, and it shows, and you can be safe. That like you can walk down the street and be safe. Who doesn't feel
Yes.
that way? That's what you need. You need to be able to feel safe in your space, in your universe. Whether you in South Africa, whether I'm in Malaysia, whether you over in Australia, you don't know what be going on in these places. I'm telling y'all now. And yet, when I was living in Bankhead, Atlanta, this is like Atlanta, Georgia. This ain't nice. But I was me. I'm telling y'all, I was me, and I could walk down the street and be safe and feel absolutely no negative impingement upon my theta. It was so refreshing. And people be like, "How you do that? You ain't scared?" No, I'm not.
Right.
I totally get where you're coming from. I totally understand exactly what you're saying. But how do you put that into words? How do you explain that to other
I just
people?
did. I just did.
Well, sure, sure, sure.
You either feeling. You either feeling. I don't know what that feeling is. It's a security.
But
It's a
like,
peace.
how do you express that? Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I think it's important to look at that. It's an indicator. Your plants, your dogs, your parrots, the safeness that you have,
Your environment.
your
Yeah.
environment, and when that's not happening, or you're a parent in the way that you deal with your kids, like we were talking about earlier in the podcast about you need to go to college and all of this stuff. It's also a reflection of the people that are around you, and that you are accepting or not accepting their own their own ethics situations and everything, and that's part of a valence package, and you're taking that on. because it's just like the plants and the cats and the dogs and the birds and animals and all that stuff reflect where you're at. But the antithesis of that, the opposite of that is if that stuff isn't happening, you're reflecting somebody else other than yourself, because that's who you really are at that point. And as you go up the conditions, and it bears to note that enemy, treason, doubt is where you're looking at the side you were on, mama or papa or whoever that you saw was the solution to the problem of survival and acting like them. You look at it and you go, I know who I really am now. That was the side I was on, but I'm not anymore. It's a compare and contrast. You look at the statistics and all of this stuff, and you go, okay, Papa was a drinker. Um, that's not me. That's Papa.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you say, okay, this is who I really am. I looked at it in enemy and treason. I'm going to suffer on up through the conditions, which is liability, after you've realized it and you've announced it to both sides, which Arthur did a couple of weeks ago. Took him a couple of days to get in touch with everybody to say, this is what I've decided. This is the side I'm on. I'm not asking for your agreement. I'm telling you what my personal truth is, my beingness, who I really am, and I will not accept and agree with this in my life anymore. Cut this shit out. And I'm letting you know, and I'm putting you on notice affinitively. This is what I've decided that is true for me. That's when you really know who you are, and you're not lying to yourself anymore. You have begun to know your own self-worth. I can't put up with this stuff anymore. You get into liability and you have to make up the damages to yourself.
Amen.
And on
And
Arthur's,
what was interesting about that
now for you,
was,
Art.
we lost him.
okay, sorry. Yeah, the internet's just playing up a bit. Um, and what was interesting about that, I actually found that really, really difficult initially. And actually, it actually made me quite anxious and quite nauseous just thinking about that process. But it was interesting because after I did the first one, the amount of load after verbally committing to somebody else, yeah, it just changed. It just changed everything almost instantly. It
Right.
was really quite interesting. And
And
then
you,
the more I did, the easier it became.
Mhm.
And then not only did it become easier, but it affirmed itself a lot more as well.
Right. And so our listeners understand. Can you get into the synchronicity of how everything started to fall into place for you?
Okay, sorry, cut out again. Ask me that again.
You had told me that how all of this stuff, your flows, the things you were receiving inbound from other people, other terminals, how everything started to change and everything just went into a synchronicity, and all of these things. I mean, some of them fantastic without getting too personal. That you and I discussed, how almost bizarre things worked out for you so that you could go to Malaysia and you could be on course full time and all that.
One day I'll share that story, and all I have to say is it was mind blowing. Because it wasn't just one factor; it was so many factors and things that just occurred was really quite incredible.
And
Yeah,
it's
because without
almost,
getting too personal, technically I
yeah,
shouldn't even be here.
right, right. And everything worked out, and that's the thing. We've talked about that before, and the phone started ringing. Flows
That
started
part.
coming
Incredible.
in. Right.
Yep. Yep.
That's how I know.
Yeah.
That's how I know.
Yeah.
Like when things start just coming seemingly out of nowhere, and like
Yes.
I started in Australia, believe it or not, Art, in Australia, I started getting a lot of clients out of Australia, just out of nowhere. And I don't know, I don't who go figure.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
I have clients in Adelaide, I have clients in Melbourne, and I have like one that was in Queenstown or something like that. But they just started coming out of nowhere, and I'm like, wow. So
Yeah. Good.
Yeah,
Yep.
and
Going
that's
international.
And that comes down to, and I know that it's an obvious thing, and we talked about this earlier. I'm gonna put these two things together here to close the podcast off because we're right about an hour. Is this comes down to what we've talked about so much in the podcast. When you find out who you really are, A-R-E, conjugation of the verb to be, beingness. You restore your beingness when you become that terminal, that point of communication that you are being. You're starting to know your own self-worth. You start pulling in these flows, showing up in the physical universe, and you're like, what just happened? I got 6 clients in Australia. That's what happened is you were actually being, doing, and having. And so you've opened up the floodgates and things just start happening instantaneously. You don't have to be OT to have that stuff happen. It's just because your relative comparison of the way things were to the way things could be, you didn't know it was going to happen because you didn't know who you really were and you didn't know your own self-worth. You weren't being yourself. That's what stops this
Yep.
stuff. This is what the ethics conditions, this is what auditing does, this is what training does. Training is most important on this subject. We've got, the personal values and ethics course, and we've got the it's basically the professional ethics course that you can do to understand all of this, how it works and everything, and listen to these podcasts. And in closing, I think the reason why we have so many people that have back off on these podcasts, and I'm just going to say it, they don't want to listen to this stuff because they're not being who they really are. It makes them
It's interesting doing the Pro TRs course, which I'm almost finished, smashing it. I've had so many revelations around it as well, especially around the basic TRs, like through the comms course. They're actually extremely powerful little TRs, and just those alone are a massive stepping stone to not only confronting the world around you, but confronting yourself as well. And I've had a whole new reality, making clay demos of every bloody TR. It's definitely and so me, um, which I didn't think was going to happen because I kind of thought I knew it, but now I know it on a very different level, which would make me a lot more serious towards that, but also how I present myself as well into the world, which
right.
is just being me, which is really interesting.
Right. And the result of the TRs is almost verbatim is being there and being comfortable. Isn't that funny?
Come on.
Being there and being
Just
comfortable.
being there,
Right.
We should do a whole
yeah,
podcast on that.
being there and being
Yeah.
comfortable.
So,
Yeah,
if you're having trouble doing
phenomenal.
TRs,
It's not a small thing to occur.
no, it
Yeah.
isn't. It isn't. But if you can't do TR0 for 2 hours straight, guess what's going on? Guess what's going on?
Well,
A
zero.
lot of mental.
Right. A lot of mental
A lot
stuff
of-
going
a
on.
lot,
You
yeah.
can't be there. So this verb to be has a lot to do with everything, to summate this. And looking at the ethics conditions and finding out who you really are allows you to open up the floodgates to flows and everything, whether it be through auditing. Well, let me back up. Whether through doing the ethics conditions, whether through auditing, whether through training, it's really all three of those things. And when you've got those things in
Yeah.
alignment, then you can put the administration in as far as your own personal admin scale, figuring out your goals, your plans, your policy, your purposes, what your statistics are. This is important, very, very important, but you have to be able to have some self-worth and be yourself. So we're going to end this off now, and feel free to put the comments on YouTube. Don't forget to go to ao-gp.org and the College of Independent Scientology.com. Sign up and register. Get on one of our free courses. Get in touch with us about the packages that we have available to get you up the bridge to clear or to OT and through clear. We've got some really great offers going on right now, and we want to help you help yourself. So for Quentin, and Arthur and myself, namaste, and we love you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.